Black students at the University of Washington demand relaxed grades because of trauma over George Floyd's death. Meanwhile, a UCLA professor is suspended, and they're considering firing him for not giving such consideration to his students. As a professor myself, it sure sounds to me like there's no choice here at all. Surrender all control of the classroom to upset kids for any reason, or you could be terminated. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we're looking at the special accommodations being requested for black students and fallout for professors who don't immediately comply with the social justice demands. And so, I'm going to go ahead and say this. You can get mad at me all you want. You can try to cancel me.
Cancel!
But there are people, including African-American kids, who are using and exploiting the death of George Floyd. I mean, that shouldn't be a particularly out there statement when you watch the riots, right? I don't even call them protesters. I call them riotesters, right? Because they're protesters, many of whom are engaging in riots as well. But the bottom line is that when you've got kids in college who've gone through 3/4 of their semester, and then the horrible thing happened in Minneapolis, that we're supposed to believe that your life has come to a grinding halt, that you can't work, you can't leave the house, you can't concentrate. Come on, right? I get it. I get why you asked for it. Why not? I mean, any excuse any college kids can use to get out of finals, they're going to take it. But the fact that you actually have professors in places like UCLA, and of course Washington immediately caved into the demand, right? Despite the fact, the question that the UCLA professor brought up is the right one. This UCLA professor, the class was completely in line, right? So he didn't know what the students looked like. He didn't see them face to face. And he asked one of the kids who demanded, how do I know if you're black? And what kind of black is enough black? And well, what about, I've got one student who's from Minneapolis, but she's white. Should I give her the accommodation as well? And for daring to ask these questions, the students have targeted him, which isn't surprising. What is surprising is that the university is going to investigate this poor bugger as if he's guilty of some kind of horrible race crime.
Well, before we get to that, hashtag delete Dr. Duke, start a trend.
Hashtag cancel Dr. Duke Show.
No, delete.
Delete.
Dr.
Delete
Duke.
Triple D's.
You
I
see
like
what I'm
it.
doing that?
The triple D.
Well, in the University of Washington. So it's not that they're so distraught. They're just too busy fighting the injustice to have any time to actually study.
Yes.
So now what we're doing is, since they're already online behind their keyboards, just twittering away, they also started a change.org petition, because everyone just starts change.org petitions now. And the current petition count, when I last checked, was 60,000 plus signatures. The petition states the University of Washington has sent out a mass email to students about the current events, including Black Lives Matter. The email addresses the most recent murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor, and how UW acknowledges the deep-seated pain and extra trauma this has caused us in the Black community. It goes on to say, many of us were already struggling to deal with the shift to emergency remote learning, financial hardships, family health issues, and the emotional strain related to the pandemic. And then the petition ends on saying, we have no answers.
Do I get to not grade final exams because of all the white cops killed in this? Do I, as a professor who happens to be Caucasian, a person of pallor, do I get to grieve for all of the white cops who've been assassinated by these roving bands of rioters? No, I guess I don't. I guess I have to stay on my post and grade their exams, right?
Yes, stay there, because it's about these students and their trauma.
Yes.
They say in their petition, we have a solution for you. Give Black students a break. We have already, in all caps, disproportionately been impacted by this pandemic in terms of health access and financial hardship. They're on a college campus.
Black college kids have not been. So you're claiming, this is really insulting. You're claiming for yourself the real suffering of African Americans who aren't you. Yes. Right? You are piggybacking on them because you're black. That's like me saying, I demand reparations for the way the Okies were treated during the Dust Bowl. Oop. Now, I may not be from Oklahoma. I may not be an Okie. It may be almost 100 years since that happened. But they were, by God, they were white. And so you owe me, I'm disproportionately affected by the way the Okies were treated in the Dust Bowl, and you owe me stuff, man.
Well, and that's why, if you look at why people signed this, some of them have interesting things to say. One student, Ariana, said, I'm a black trans student at the UW School of Social Work, and with everything that's going on in the world and in my community, I can barely focus at work, let alone on assignments that do nothing to help anyone.
Then
the fact
why are
that
you
it wasn't
there?
Explicitly said that finals are canceled for blacks.
Why? If you're
Not
that
explicitly canceled.
If you are that stressed as a black
going.
trans person that you can't function, you can't focus, you think the assignments are all a stupid waste of time, with all due respect, why are you there? What is the point of it?
Well, she doesn't have too much respect because she then goes on to say that how dare they basically say the all lives matter opinion. It goes against the claims of standing for racial equity, in my opinion. Please let them know that this is unacceptable.
It's unacceptable. And while you're at it, don't make me take my final exam and give me an A.
Yes. And then we have another
I got it. Reparations.
Oh, good one.
Make a capital A. That's the new movement. Hey, kids, I know you're traumatized. I know you can't eat, you can't sleep, you can't leave your door because you're so horrified and paralyzed by what's happening. But I'm proposing to you a new program sweeping colleges across the country. Let's call it the Reparations program, where don't come to campus, don't pay the tuition. We'll give you all A's for 4 years and a diploma and call it equality.
And that's what Ahmed also says.
Ahmed's one of the people who wrote in? Mm-hmm. What did Ahmed say?
Motherfucker, Whitey needs to give us these easy grades, and she...
And see, that's a very creative Ebonics way of spelling. I suppose
true.
sheet was spelled S-H-E-E-T?
E-E-I-T.
Oh, S-H-E-I-T is the fecal matter, how he spelled it. And see, that's another thing we got to do. Let's just officially get rid of spelling. I mean, come on, man. You're holding the man. The man is holding you down. Look at the creative way that sheet was spelled. S-C-H-I-E-T.
S-H-E-E-I-T.
S-H-E-E-I-T. Shit.
Shit,
right?
That's what I'm saying.
This is the innovations in the English language that we need. In fact, we should turn over the actual speaking of English in this country to Ebonics. Get Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who starred in the airplane films, speaking jive. Get Kareem to just do the news. Force everybody to speak, listen, learn, and love through Ebonics.
On to Vermont, where nothing really good comes out of there. Little Vermont. Bernie Sanders. So the University of Vermont, a religion professor of all professors, is now blaming white Christian nationalism for the current racial tensions that are happening in the United States of America. There she is. In response to the killing of George Floyd, Elise R. Morgenstein Furst, who's an associate professor in the religion department, she's, according to her profile, is claimed to be an expert in Islam, religions of South Asia, and the history of religion. She, of course, took to Twitter, because that's all professors do these days, is they take to Twitter. And she tweeted out, "White Christian nationalism is the thing we're all watching. It's inextricable from the anti-blackness murdering folks. It is baked into the state/resources from all over, of course. But if you're ignoring religion still, I can't fathom why at all."
So she's an expert on Islam, but she has nothing to say about Islamofascism, right? Not a thing. And when it comes to the killing of George Floyd, she calls this Christian nationalism without a single shred of evidence. Mm-hmm. Not one actual statement as to how Christianity is being exploited by nationalists in order to kill black people. The fact that most African Americans in this country identify as Christians, does that make them Christian nationalists too?
It depends on the,
Was George Floyd a Christian nationalist who was killed by white Christian nationalists?
Then it's a battle within the Christian
I don't understand
nationalists. How we're going to...
We'll have to
ask her.
This is
Tweet at her.
This is the problem. And this is at my university and every university I've taught at. Kids sign up and take courses in religious studies. Yep. What they're getting is courses in anti-religious studies. We're going to make... My kids constantly come to my English classes to learn about, biblical things. I teach books inspired. I actually teach the Bible at UWO. Kids will come to my classes to get a fair hearing of what the Bible has to say without all that prejudice, because in their religious studies classes, they got professors like this who force them to, who start from the premise that Christianity is complicit with racism and nationalism. And so we're going to, they deconstruct the Bible. This is why it's garbage. This is why as a woman you should never be a Christian. This is why gays and homosexuals, speaking of Islam, right, should never be Christians because of this. But Islam's somehow different, right?
It is. And that's why every lesson, though, is let's look through the lens of this and the lens of that. That's how they cherry code it.
And so if you're taking courses in religious studies at a college campus, just remember what you're doing. You're taking courses in anti-religious studies.
Yes, this is the same professor, too, who decided to retweet the picture of President Trump holding his Bible outside of the desecrated St. John's Church in D.C. And her caption was, truly F, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk.
And it's funny to me because this is a woman who clearly doesn't like the Bible. Now, with a last name of Morgenstein, maybe perhaps she may be of Jewish origin, so maybe the Old Testament is okay to her. Maybe although she's not talking about Judeo-Christian nationalism, right? She's talking about Christian nationalism. So we might assume that she's Jewish, and we might assume that the holding up of the Bible bothered her, but clearly, Donald Trump is identified as a Christian, and he was holding up the Bible as a Christian. So if that's what she thinks Christianity is, so the Bible now is the equivalent of a flaming cross. The Bible now is the equivalent now of a noose, right? In her interpretation of Christian nationalism, Donald Trump walked across the street to visit a church that Black Lives Matter rioters tried to burn down. Let me repeat that. A church that was burnt down by rioters protesting racial discord. Again, if that had been a black church in Mississippi that burned, holy cow, right? The hate crime legislation. But no, it's not. And so Donald Trump went over there with his Bible. So Donald Trump stands outside a burning church holding a Bible. And the focus of the entire picture for this professor of religious studies is hate crime, but not on behalf of Donald Trump. What did she say?
Truly.
The caption was, truly F blank blank blank.
Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk.
There you go.
You fill in the blank.
She says, Christian nationalism is inextricable from the anti-blackness of murdering folks. How do you, based on what? I mean, it used to be that when the liberal hippies of the 60s actually said stupid things, they tried to prove them.
I did notice that.
Remember that?
The radicals of the 60s
They at least tried to argue.
Yeah, we've gone far away from
There's no argument here.
That. Yeah,
there's just fundamental bigotry and insanity.
That's pretty much where we're at, yeah. All right, we go from Vermont all the way across the country to California, where we're going to go to Stanford. Now, we have a Stanford dean who is citing cop killing approvingly. Okay, a person who killed a cop, and we'll explain exactly what happened with this. This dean is saying, doing a nice quote about this cop killer. Now, universities are sending out emails, and it's actually quoting this woman who's from the FBI's most wanted list of fugitives. The Daily Wire actually reported that on June 1st, the dean of students at Stanford University sent an email to students in which she approvingly cited a quote from Assata Shakur, a fugitive on the list of the FBI's most wanted terrorists who's convicted of murder in the violent 1973 death of a New Jersey policeman. Okay, the email from Dean Mona Hicks started by addressing COVID-19 issues with a variety of safety tips and advice about, all the protests and everything happening. Now, as protest organizers around the world plan nonviolent demonstrations, we must also recognize the grief and pain that are thrust into these spaces. Despite efforts to organize civilly, there are times when some will engage in destructive or harmful behavior. In every case, the well-being of our students is our top priority. Okay, fine. She makes that.
Notice that she didn't condemn it.
Oh, no.
She didn't say that's wrong. Destructive and harmful.
There are times
right, and we're not going to call those people out, but go ahead.
Okay. Now, the conclusion of the email is where it is. It's interesting. I appreciate all the emails and texts of solidarity and encouragement that I have received in my short tenure at Stanford. As a Black woman, I am also struggling to make meaning in our world today, but your humanity gives me hope. Your energy, your education, your truth, and your purpose. This loving refrain from Assata Shakur still rings true as I shelter in place. And this is what Shakur had said. It is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains.
Yeah, and that would be a little bit more convincing if you were not getting it out of the mouth of a murderer. But as we've seen on college campuses, they have turned murderers if they murder the right people, into heroes, right? And so what you're doing is you are recreating myths, right? You are tearing down American culture and its history, and you are re-enshrining in the place of heroes killers, right? And so, and you see it in popular TV, right? So gangster rappers now who talk about hoes and putting caps in people and living large, they're heroic now because they may be materialistic, they may be misogynistic, they may be homophobic, but they're doing it to fight the man.
Oh, yeah, so it's okay.
And so that's okay. We have to make them heroes. And so you are at one of the premier universities in the world, Stanford. You are a tenured dean. You are a powerful woman who, as a black woman, am struggling to make sense of my world. No, you're not. Your world is six-figure salaries, tenure and summers off. Your world is privilege. Your world is academic privilege. Your world is the world that there are about 50 million white people would trade their jobs for yours in a second. So you can pretend all you want that the extra melanin in your skin has suddenly confused you at Stanford. Maybe you're going to go to the Department of Equity and get yourself a bigger fat raise for having suffered as a black dean. But if you look yourself in the mirror at the end of the night in your plush California condo, and what you really see is somebody who's a huckster, somebody who is yourself exploiting the suffering of real African Americans, poor ones in inner cities, for your enchanted life, and trading on your skin color to get some street cred and some bona fides. Congratulations. There's a word for that I better not use, because if I do, hashtag cancel Dr. Duke, we'll delete Dr. Duke will continue to grow. Hasn't started yet, but you can go ahead and start that.
Well, just so everyone knows, Assata Shakur was actually found guilty of first-degree murder plus 7 more felonies, and she was sentenced to life plus 33 years, but she escaped from prison on November 2nd, 1979.
And we've not found her since.
She's on that fugitives list still.
It's too bad, because this is the time that if you're out there listening, come back. You know you won't get arrested, and you won't be put back in jail, time. Right? And you will be on the college lecture series. You will have every major university in this country paying you hundreds of $1,000s to tell how you stuck it to the system.
Well, and then, I mean, she can have all these different talks, too, like how she stuck it to the system that way, what's life like on the run.
What's she been doing?
You know, she'll do an updated thing.
Like the one thing I can guarantee, Miss Shakur, is if you come back to public life, you will be heralded as a hero. You will be championed and triumphed. There's no way the American legal system will lay a finger on you. Not. And you will stand to make millions of dollars. There will be a movie about your life. You will become the Rosa Parks of this generation. Rather than give up your seat, you put a bullet in a cop. That's what this generation sees as social justice.
We know Al Sharpton will be on your side.
Yep.
You can walk around with him if you like.
Speaking of burning things down, it always amazes me to see Al Sharpton everywhere where this kind of racial foment is going on.
Talking about hucksters.
Because what reparations has he paid to Freddie's Fashion Mart, the Jewish clothing store that he was complicit in burning? What reparations did he pay to all those cops in the fake Tawana Brawley rape that he set up, right, simply to mean nothing? What do you get for lying, cheating, destroying people's lives? You get an anchor seat at CNN and a first-class ticket to every racial event in the history of the world. You get to go to George Floyd's funeral and stand up there and co-opt the funeral with an attack on Donald Trump. That's what you get if you're Al Sharpton. That's what happens if you're Assata Shakur. I hate to say it, but it seems to me that killing cops for this entire generation of radicals is a resume enhancer.
And now it's time for some real education. Alexander Pope is one of the greatest English poets who nobody really needs anymore, but he was certainly one of the foremost poets of the 18th century. His major works include The Rape of the Lock, The Dunciad, and an essay on criticism. He's considered a master of the heroic couplet. According to the Oxford Dictionary of Quotations, Pope is the second most quoted writer in the English language after Shakespeare. He is considered a master of the heroic couplet.
And Alexander Pope is really, one of the great poets. I think you mentioned that nobody reads anymore. I mean, he is in the 18th century literature has really suffered under the years. I mean, it's a great period of reading. It's not my favorite period either, but you had the incomparable Jonathan Swift, Alexander Pope. You had John Dryden. You had a number of really interesting figures that we don't read that much anymore. Pope is one of the great English poets of all time. He's an interesting fella. He had a disease called by the age of 12, he got a disease called Pott's disease, P-O-T-T disease, which is a kind of tuberculosis, a form of tuberculosis that actually warped his spine. He never got taller than 4'6" tall. He was a bit of a bent over. He was stooped. If you get a chance to with your kids, sit down with your kids and talk about him, look at some of the images of him. He led a physically very challenging life. He also was one of the great satirists. We a couple weeks ago, we looked at a couple of quotes from Jonathan Swift from this period. Now we're going to take a look at Alexander Pope. And Pope, too, was a tremendous satirist. In fact, if it weren't for Jonathan Swift, he probably would be recognized as the greatest satirist, certainly of the 18th century. He made many enemies because of his satires. Unbelievable. At one point, he actually carried pistols with him when he walked his dogs because he had managed to successfully so annoy the powers that be. Whatever happened to the days when artists were going after the establishment, regardless of who they were, right? Going after the establishment, instead of kissing up and cozying up to administrations like Obama's, right? They were, real satirists attacked everybody for their fecklessness. And so Pope was that kind of guy. And the passage I chose for us today is, I think, kind of an interesting one of all the things we could have done. Of course, The Rape of the Lock is a beautiful poem, well worth reading. The Dunciad is a great spoof and satire and stupidity. He wrote in heroic couplets, Alexandrines they're called, right? Heroic couplets, trying to imitate the actual verse form of the ancient Greeks. And he actually did work on Homer as well as everything else as a critic. But if we go for a moment to the actual selection I've made, this comes from a prologue, not actually a literary work of art on his own. Addison, you remember Addison and Steele from this period, the great journalistic satirists. Pope had a rivalry with Addison, and they went back and forth about this, right? They were two brilliant men just teasing and satirizing each other. But Pope was always one to put that kind of carping aside when a work of genius was performed or when literary pursuits overrode politics. And so Addison wrote Cato, a play about the ancient Roman. The sacrificial ancient Roman, Marcus Cato, as a way of pulling forward the virtues of Cato that had been forgotten by the modern world. And Alexander Pope actually wrote the preface for him, or commented in it. And this is what he says the purpose of drama is. What is the purpose of theater? For Alexander Pope, it was to wake the soul by tender strokes of art, to raise the genius and to mend the heart, to make mankind in conscious virtue bold, live over each scene and be what they behold. For this the tragic muse first trod the stage, commanding tears to stream through every age. A beautiful summation of the purpose of theater. Theater is to change us, to wake the soul with tender strokes of art, right? To raise the genius and to mend the heart. Somebody who really understood the powerful impact that art has on morality.
All right, as always, you can follow us on Facebook and Parler. And if you have a question for our Friday Q&A, visit freedomproject.com/askduke or send us a message on social media. Now we're going to wrap things up with our fun fact of the day. According to the FBI frequently asked questions, as of the beginning of June 2020, there have been 523 fugitives on the 10 most wanted fugitives list. 489 individuals appearing on the list have been located, and 162 of them were because of a direct result of citizen cooperation.
All right, we are now officially the FBI's most wanted, and we need to do a sign-off in the John Walsh voice. And that's going to do it for this show. For Freedom Project, I'm John Walsh. She's Katie. Until next time, keep identifying those felons.